the peninsula of Qatar in the Persian Gulf, many miles from Palestine. Included in our story because a young Palestinian refugee lives there. How Omar got there is what's important, as you'll see. Since oil was discovered in 1952, Qatar has known great changes. Before 1952, we would have seen a quiet, traditional life. Arab fishing boats, pearl divers. Today, a bustling oil industry employs 3,000 people. One of them is Omar Maher, the young Palestinian refugee.
Weather partly cloudy and hazy. Visibility 5 to 10 miles. And the outlook for tomorrow, wind northwest 20 to 25 knots, sea 6 to 8 feet. Did you copy? Over. Thank you. Standing by.
The oil concession is for offshore drilling. Mainland headquarters are linked with floating drilling rigs, tankers, and helicopters by electronic communications, radio. Omar Maher is one of a small, highly skilled crew that keeps the radio system working. Omar Maher was born in the Arab town of Jaffa in Palestine in 1942. His family's farm included 2 orange groves. Omar lived there until he was 6.
I do remember that our house was looking over the seashore. It had 2 stories. I still remember that we used to have lots and lots of oranges at our place.
By 1948, war in Palestine had created 750,000 Arab refugees, amongst them Omar, aged 6. He had his first school days thanks to a volunteer teacher from Jaffa, a refugee like himself. Everywhere, the teachers were unpaid volunteers. At first, there were no books, not even pencils. But as time passed, a few large tents could be spared. So at last, in the withering heat of the Jordan Valley, there was a little shelter from the scorching sun. Long hours passed before there was a bit to eat or drink. Omar had never known what it felt like to be really hungry. But now every day he was hungry. He kept on asking, "When are we going home?" But he never got a straight answer. Not from his parents, not from anyone. All they said was, "Not now. Be quiet, be a good boy, and help look after your little sister. Then soon we'll all go home again." But the days turned into months. Children were born, old people died, and were buried far from home. But still, they all were certain they would soon see their green trees in Palestine again. In December 1948, the United Nations passed a resolution which said that the Palestine refugees wishing to return to their homes and live in peace with their neighbors should be allowed to go back, and the others should receive compensation. So Omar was told again and again. But he didn't understand, because if it were true, then they should go home. Why did they stay in this bad place with the months turning into years? As the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, began to take over relief work from the Red Cross and Quakers who had faced the first emergency, the importance of education had to be fully faced. UNRWA built schools and, with the help of UNESCO, developed an education program. By the time Omar was 12 and in the 6th grade, he was an excellent student. That year, he finished first in his class. The Jericho camp of Ein Sultan, at the foot of the Mount of Temptation, where Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights, had grown from a sprawl of tents into a well-defined town of mud brick houses built by the refugees. Omar and his family had lived here for 9 years, by the time he went to secondary school, high school. He and one other boy from his class were the only ones selected for secondary school. Soon the day would come when, armed with a certificate, he would be able to get a job and help his family. But all his classmates felt the same way. He applied for a job, and then another, and another, and every time he was turned away. What was wrong? One day, he heard that hands were needed for the harvest. Both he and his brother got jobs for several weeks. They started down near the River Jordan, and then, as the summer wore on, moved westward up into the hills. It was great to be working. But all too soon, the harvest was over, and he was back in Jericho, in the camp, with nothing to do. Once a month now, he would go to collect the family's rations. It was all he could do to help. To qualify for the UNRWA rations, you had to have lost your home, be without a source of livelihood, and be destitute. To Omar, each month's trip to the ration center reminded him again that he could not even pay for his own food. His father had been a farmer, reaping the fruits of his own good earth, his own hard work, and not depending on anyone's charity for his daily bread. One day, Omar's uncle came to tell him he'd heard there might be an opening at the clinic. It was just around the corner, and he ran over to apply. He knew a girl working at the clinic, and luckily, she came to the door.
أهلاً عمر.
سمعت إنه في عندكم وظيفة.
متأسفة. يا ريت في.
She didn't want to disappoint him, but she could only tell him they wanted an assistant pharmacist, someone already trained. Unwanted, unemployed, nowhere to go. UNRWA knew that this was the case for almost all refugee youth, and so years earlier turned to a sister UN body for help. From the ILO, a consultant had come to start a training program for young Palestine refugees. The first center was opened by Jordan's Minister of Education at Qalandia in 1953. It was just north of Jerusalem. UNRWA's second vocational center was opened in Gaza, an obvious choice. 300,000 refugees crowded into a narrow strip of land 27 miles long, nowhere more than 5 miles wide. Young refugees flocked to apply for admission to the training center. Another center followed on the outskirts of Amman, the capital of Jordan. Near the ancient town of Sidon, a combined vocational and teacher training center was opened for refugees living in Lebanon. And near Damascus, yet another center was opened for the refugees who had wound up in Syria. In the intense heat of the Jericho summer, Omar and his jobless friends would get out of the sun and have a cool drink in the camp cafe. One day, he saw in the newspaper that there were vacancies for refugees his age at the Qalandia Training Center.
I felt that I would like to learn some technical thing. I asked my father to let me learn something. I wanted to be independent.
في إعلان للتدريب المهني.
تدريب مهني وين؟ تفضل. بدك تصير مهندس.
He applied to enter Qalandia. He took the entrance exam and was called for an interview. He had to wait 6 weeks, but then the results were posted in the youth center at his camp. Omar had been chosen. To wake up away from home in a boys' dormitory was a whole new experience for him. But Omar quickly learned the ropes.
I liked lots of people there, and I had good relations with all the instructors and the boys. As a matter of fact, I'm so grateful actually to everybody in Qalandia. There was a teacher called Ustaz Ahmad. He was the electrical instructor.
نعم. أن كتلة التموين المستعملة في التلفزيون هي تكوين.
He was a great instructor, I should say. He really knew what he was talking about.
أي تكوين كل الموجة.
Mr. Shahade was our radio and TV instructor. The way he was teaching us gave any student the chance to prove that he is intelligent. It's no place for a lazy student.
All students were encouraged to take part in sports, but Omar, it seems, was not a great athlete.
The sports instructor asked me to try to play soccer. I don't know why he thought I could make a good goalkeeper.
Omar, like all trainees, was required to do 19 hours in the classroom every week. In addition to his specialized training, he had to improve his knowledge of English. Then he had to continue mathematics from where he left off at school and learn the elements of general science and technical drawing.
In this case, we can take this line as a resultant of the two forces.
At that time, the Qalandia Training Center was already offering 15 courses, covering a wide range of practical, technical jobs. Omar could have chosen among many skilled trades, but he had no confusion about what he wanted.
I liked electronics, and I liked radios, sound waves, and electricity. It was something like a hobby, not a job. I really liked it. Actually, it was just the beginning. Every day there is something new in our science. And because I took this as my job and my fortune, I have to keep studying it. And this might take me all my life, I believe.
Omar was one of 100 young refugees graduated from Qalandia in 1961. He quickly found a job as a radio operator at the airport. But soon he heard that the oil industry in Qatar was expanding. They were short of technicians and were hiring many Palestinians. He sent in his application.
I soon found out that working for an oil company, you had to keep everything up to standard and really know how to do your job.
In Qatar, Omar spends a lot of time at sea. He had to get his sea legs.
We have a captain called Alistair Weston. He used to laugh a lot if we asked him, "Is it rough outside?"
Welcome, this is Peter. Go ahead.
Would you give me the weather forecast, please, Omar?
Weather forecast.
We've got a bit of hiss on this would you check out the sports control, please?
2100 local time today.
Traditional Arab dhows equipped with diesel engines serve very well as workboats.
Roger, Roger, we are reading you loud and clear. Coming in now, okay.
I feel I am very fortunate, actually, that I have this job in Qatar, because it helps me quite a lot. I have done many, many things towards my family and my relations. The helicopter pilot, his name is Ted Van Cavella. He's a Dutchman. He's one of the best pilots, and he's very frank, you know. He likes to talk with the employees. The first time that he said something in Dutch, and I replied in Dutch, I said, "Goed begrepen." He was surprised and very happy that I had understood what he had said. One day he came to the radio room and asked me, "How the hell do you know Dutch?" I said, "Well, by just keeping on listening."
Ted Van Cavella's route includes a brief stop at one of the marine production platforms built in the center of the Eid al-Shaghi field, where oil was discovered in 1960. These platforms are built on pilings sunk into the seabed 100 feet below. Normally they run unattended. Through them, crude oil from the undersea wells is separated from gas and then pumped through a trunk line to Halul, a tiny island to the north.
Halul is 53 miles off Doha. It's like a desert, no fresh water on it, no water at all. We used to call Halul the Green Island because it was covered with a grass we call khubbeze in Arabic. In fact, before they built the terminal in Halul, there was only a radio hut there for a weather station.
When Omar is out working on Halul, he is on something like shift work.
Not exactly on a shift, but I'm on call 24 hours a day. In case something happens, if something stops, I have to go and check it. Even if it's going to keep me awake till the morning, well, I have to do it in one way or another. Who knows? I can't tell that I'm not going to marry or be engaged to any girl. Maybe on this leave, if I see just a reasonable girl who accepts me as I am. Oh, I'd love to be engaged to a pretty, good girl who understands me and I understand her. I thought Doha would be like Jericho, but everybody warned me that it was going to be a great deal hotter here and much more humid in the summer. And the people, well, I couldn't understand a word they said in the start. They were speaking Arabic, but their dialect is quite different from mine. Well, now that I am used to it, I can understand every word they say.
Omar, far from family and friends, takes a lot of photographs. It keeps him in touch with life.
I like faces, actually, expressions, and, well, pretty faces, kids.
Omar was in Qatar on the 5th of June, 1967, at the outbreak of new war in the Middle East. The fighting ended 6 days later on June 11th, and once again, Palestinian Arab refugees continued moving eastward. Omar was without any news. Even now, he doesn't like to talk about how he felt during those days. It was happening all over again. This time, tens of thousands already refugees were fleeing eastward across the Jordan, leaving behind even the mud brick camps around Jericho. So far as Omar knew, his mother was among them.
It was really a bad time for all of us. Actually, I couldn't do anything except keep on asking, because I wanted to know what was the situation.
The news was each day more confusing. Refugees poured over the Jordan's ruined bridges, headed for whatever shelter they could find. At last, Omar's brother wrote that word had come from their mother, still on the occupied west bank of the Jordan. She was all alone.
He wrote her a small letter, just 3 or 4 words. Leave today, waiting for you at the river.
No matter how terrible the uncertainty, Omar had at least the knowledge that thanks to his job, he could save his mother from the misery of homelessness and destitution for a second time. Omar's job is 1,000 miles across desert from the rest of his family. He writes them constantly.
I'd like to have my mother with me here, but it's difficult.
He rented a small house for her in Amman.
I was really happy I could do this. I'm willing to do more and more, you know, because, I mean, we Arabs are so close to each other, more than anybody else.
Omar, as the oldest son, now holds his father's place in relation to his brothers and sisters.
This is Wafa. She just left school.
Omar went to Egypt to visit his younger brother last summer. He's putting him through medical school at Cairo University. There was another younger brother who was a law student.
He got killed in action. It was to have been his graduation day, and it was his 22nd birthday as well.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Omar is a Muslim. His religion is always close at hand.
You can worship your God any place, anywhere. It's a matter of being good to every human being.
ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر.
Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs are old enough to remember the homes they left behind near the Mediterranean coast. Omar remembers very well, and he is still young. Thousands of older people, like his father, have been released from their memory by death. Countless more thousands have been born into the refugee life. After all these years, and even with the distance that now separates him from his homeland, his main preoccupation remains with his people, with his knowing he is one of them.
Look at us Palestinians. This is really terrible. I fully agree with you that fighting, killing people, does not solve the problem. We know this. But we are struggling for our rights. Everybody is claiming that this is his country, the Jews and the Arabs. But in the meantime, who is living in our homes? Who is cultivating our land?
You know, there is not a single government in this world, not one, that wants the Palestinian Arabs to remain refugees. Many solutions have been offered. None has been acceptable to all the parties involved. And so a quarter century later, they are still refugees.
مفرد ولا مثنى ولا جمع؟ مفرد ولا مثنى ولا جمع؟ عاطف مفرد. نقدر نجيب المثنى. المثنى مدرسة. مثنى مدرسة.
It was not just a question of history repeating itself. Each flight took them farther away, farther from home.
لو كنا 5 في 6 30 احنا كام عندنا العدد 7.
Omar says that in every one of these children, he cannot help seeing himself as he was over 20 years ago. He wonders what chance he would have had today, with the number of homeless Palestinians so much greater that UNRWA's help, even emergency help for children, is facing far-reaching cuts. Next year, some schools and training centers may have to close. It would be a sad world indeed if the education and training of a whole generation should come to a halt. Come to a halt only because of the lack of funds. If this should happen, it will be because people around the world just don't know the situation. Would you like to help a refugee boy? Or it could be a girl. It costs just $50 a year to keep a child in an UNRWA school. If you are interested, write to UNRWA at the United Nations, New York.